Welcome to another edition of Eye on the Issues. And today we're talking about campaign finance, specifically in, of course, the state of Wyoming. We're looking at a report today that's called No One's Buying Wyoming Elections, a candid look at a decade of campaign finance disclosure. Steve Klein, the author of that report, joins us now. Steve, thanks for being here. Tell us, why did you do this?
Mike, I've worked on campaign finance issues for my entire career, and that includes 15 years on and off in Wyoming. And my position is often coming at campaign finance very skeptically. I don't like red tape in any of its forms, but particularly with campaign finance, you're putting all these reporting requirements on anybody running for office. And that can be sophisticated people, but can also that applies equally to grassroots people. And people get tripped up in red tape, and all too often they get reported to the government, and instead of running their campaign, they're being lambasted in the press or even investigated by the government for some routine filing mistakes. So that's where I was coming from, but I realized, you know what, there's all these reports and I've never really taken a close look at them. And Wyoming has probably one of the more simple, to its credit, simple and straightforward campaign finance regime. So I decided to actually go and read 10 years of reports. It's called, and I should throw this out there, wycampaignfinance.gov. Ycampaignfinance.gov is also known as YCFIS, the Wyoming Campaign Finance Information System. And that is where online every candidate for state Senate, every candidate for state House, and every statewide candidate has to file their reports. So these are all available to anybody who wants to look at them. And that's what I did, reviewed them, and I've shared my findings in this report.
And you're no neophyte when it comes to this stuff. Let's talk about the case for a second, if we can, that was struck down, called under the First Amendment, Wyoming Gun Owners v. Gray. Can you tell us about that one?
LIGO v. Gray was really, again, that kind of started with this whole thing that Wyoming gun owners had put out a few ads kind of criticizing a candidate for office. And did that fall under Wyoming campaign finance law? Were they advocating for that candidate's election or not? We took the position they were not. It's just hard-hitting issue advocacy relating to gun rights that didn't matter. That's the way you should interpret these things. Does this ad still have merit, whether this candidate wins the election or not? And that was our position. And we had to sue after being fined $500. We had to sue in federal court to vindicate our interpretation of the law. And I was there as a lobbyist when we worked that, and I tried to tell them, look, this is never going to fly. And the corporations committee didn't listen to me. And then we had to go to federal court and we won. So that was kind of the position there. And that went all the way up on appeal. I've done, gosh, how many other cases that some of them very quick in Wyoming, some of them drawn out like that one, but it was good to win. And I've never seen that provision enforced since then. So I think for all intents and purposes, it's dead.
Gotcha. Good to hear. Now, let's drill down into this report. I understand you looked at 414 races from 2016 through 2024, and you kind of drilled down on that. Go ahead.
Well, I think the common refrain with campaign finance is people are buying elections. That's the seductive thing, right? The seductive line. And it's frustrating to me. It's frustrating that no matter how many times a clearly outgunned candidate wins an election, it's always, well, it's the rich person, or it's their donors, they wouldn't have won. And does money make a difference? Absolutely. From a House race in Laramie County to statewide, absolutely. But nevertheless, the fact of the matter is that everything from the governor's race, Governor Gordon was significantly outgunned by Foster Freeze when he first won in the Republican primary, going on 8 years ago. Uh, Nevertheless, and so I did the numbers. I crunched the numbers, and it's under 60%. It's like 58%. In 58% of Wyoming races, does the person who won the election have they actually spent the most? And there's a lot of qualifications there. And I spend like how many pages going, hey, look, there's some, this isn't the full story, but nevertheless, if these raw numbers are supposed to mean something, that's what they tell. So it's barely significantly statistically significant when you say 50, almost 60% of the time. That's not If it was 80, 90, 95, that would be a little more in the direction of, yeah, people are buying elections.
Right. Now, what I found interesting is that the Wyoming campaign finance disclosure laws are essentially an honor system. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and I'm glad about this, right? I like that again, people can just go about their business and file their reports and spend their time on campaigning. But the idea behind campaign finance law, if there's supposed to be accountability, there should be some kind of audit at some point. Again, that these reports, and I was a treasurer of a committee in Wyoming all the way back in 2014, and all you do is go online, plug in the numbers, and then it generates a report that anybody can look at. That's it. Unless there's an obvious error, unless you put like, here's someone so and so donated $10,000 to my campaign, which in a house race would be $8,500 above the contribution limit. Unless there's an obvious thing like that, you're not going to get any follow up from the Secretary of State. You're certainly not going to be investigated in any way, shape, or form. So that's the thing I put out there, that while so many efforts to expand the law are focused on independent actors, be it super PACs or be it people out there just taking out ads. But there's no accountability under the law just for candidates. If this is supposed to be a check on corruption, then there should be some kind of audit system. And I put forward that should be random. It should be, there shouldn't be this complaint driven process where the only people getting investigated are those who have campaign finance complaints filed against them, usually by their political opposition. So that's where I come from, that yeah, it's really a check on corruption in name only, because if there's a truly corrupt person out there running for office, guess what? They're going to be able to fudge their campaign finance numbers.
Interesting. And let's talk about what happens in many bigger states than Wyoming, for example, money coming in from out of state. How does that play out?
Well, whether if you're donating directly to a campaign, the money is disclosed whether it's from out of state or whether it's from an in-state. I didn't analyze that in this report, but the information is there for someone who wants to do it, to see a given campaign. And to some people, that's very important. And some people might think, hey, and of course, the running joke in Wyoming is that donations from Jackson Hole are in fact from out of state, right? I don't buy into that entirely, but I get the joke. So it doesn't really play into my report in and of itself, but it's important thing is that data is there. And certainly the spreadsheets that I put together and we made them available online, all the raw data is provided in links that are available in the report. And that raw data can be added to or used in for just about whatever people want. And I think that's a kind of a cool part of this is the first, as far as I know, certainly the first publicly available data set that not only includes the numbers from the reports, but also the vote totals. So you have now this comparison that, can be used for future research as well.
And what would you say is the biggest surprise that you came across during your reporting?
I hate to say this, but some very blatant violations. There are people who file reports, and part of me, given my skepticism of campaign finance, given my desire for people to be able to run for office, part of me is glad. But when you find, for example, a $1,000 contribution and the name is person who wished to remain anonymous, that's a 900, even under the current laws, you have to disclose the name of anybody who gives more than $100. And so that's really one of those things. Like, how did this happen? Why wasn't this report amended? Why, this looks about as blatant as a violation gets. So that's my point, that there's also some skepticism as to how many of these are even reviewed by the Secretary of State's office, how many citizens really take a look at this, because it doesn't seem like it takes a seasoned lawyer like myself to see things like that and go, wait, this is a problem.
Now, you touched on this a little bit ago, but let's go back to it. What are your recommendations moving forward?
I really believe before any other expansions are done to YCFIS, to who has to disclose and when, there has to be some kind of formal audit system, and it should be randomized. that's campaign finance should mostly look at actual campaigns and candidates. And it shouldn't be, even to my, Mike, this is crazy that we just passed December 31st, right? Every December 31st in a non-election year, every campaign is supposed to file a non-election year report. Usually in Wyoming, those numbers are just zero. We don't have the perpetual campaign in Wyoming that you would see in other states or certainly at the federal level. But nobody, like so few people file that report. It just doesn't get filed, and it's required even if it's a bunch of zeros. So there needs to be a reckoning of the system as it is and whether the parts that already exist are working before there's more expansion. But, what I'm up against or what the so-called campaign finance reformers would rather expand campaign finance than even take a close look at the regime that already exists.
And is there anything that I'm not asking you about that you've learned that you think is important?
I think optimistically, the numbers here are still incredibly low. It's hard to raise money. It's hard to get people to support you. But in my experience in Wyoming, grassroots or whatever you want to say, shoe leather, there are still ample opportunities to win, even if you're outgunned financially. It's harder in larger districts, in the rural districts, because you got to put gas in your tank to go door to door. But where I used to live in Cheyenne, downtown, you can walk that district 3 times, in a primary season, get to know voters. That doesn't take money, right? But even if you do need to raise money, you can still run a heck of a campaign for 10,000 bucks that you can do that. You can raise 10 grand between just 7 donors, no problem. So I want people to walk away not discouraged. Too often campaign finance, that whole cliche of money buys elections. I'm not going to run because I'm outgunned. And it's just that negative nabombism, is that what they call that? That kind of negativity. I hope these numbers give people hope and inspire more people to throw their hat in the ring.
I would say so. I mean, when you hear you can raise maybe $10,000 and run a campaign in any state for that matter, in any district, that's you got to say, wow, we can still do that. Can't do that in California, can't do that in New York State, but great to hear that you can do that in Wyoming.
Yeah.
All right, Steve. Well, thank you so much. Steve Klein, once again, this report regarding campaign finance. If you want to read more about it, just go to wyliberty.org. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter as well. Steve, thanks again.
Thanks a lot, Mike.